too much against him. I raised an eyebrow. Colin was not ordinarily so generous when it came to politics. "So your mother requires us as reinforcements?" He shifted in his chair. "Every year Deeley puts together a party to join him for a leisurely cruise up the Nile and a stay at his house in Luxor. Now that he's invited her, she doesn't feel that she can refuse. No doubt she balks at the idea of finding herself trapped on a boat for week after week in limited company. If that were the case, I wouldn't blame her. I didn't like the sound of it either. I'm sure she does, but that's not what stopped her. You know, she met Father in Egypt. Halfway up the Great Pyramid at Giza," I said. "They were engaged by the time they returned to the bottom and married 3 days later." The story had endeared his mother to me from the first moment I'd heard it. It was the culmination of nearly 2 decades during which, with her delightfully eccentric father's support, she'd steadfastly avoided marriage in favour of exotic travel. I had expected we'd get along famously, but our relationship had a tendency to run from moderately strained to openly hostile. Still, we respected each other, begrudgingly, and had more in common than either of us was likely to admit in public. I had no illusions that travelling together would bring us closer. They went back every winter after that until he died, but she hasn't returned since, Colin said. She couldn't bear to go without him. What changed? He shrugged. She told me I was impertinent when I asked. Presumably Deeley knew going there might be challenging for her, and that's why he hasn't proffered the invitation until now, after so many years have passed. I think we ought to accompany her, as it may prove an emotionally difficult journey. We won't be alone in offering support. Kat's agreed to come as well. Colin's nearly grown daughter, Katharina von Lange, was unknown to him until 2 years ago. His work as an agent of the Crown took him around the globe, securing the interests of the Empire. It was frequently dangerous. Long before we met, he'd had a relationship with an Austrian countess and longtime colleague. Kat was the product of their involvement. The Countess had hidden their daughter's existence from him, fearing that if he were known to be her father, the child could be used to get to him. Such are the ways of covert agents, or so I'm told. I long ago decided not to argue the point. It made for a more peaceful home. Obviously, Colin had no such fears. He did not hesitate to marry me and start a family. Yet apparently the Countess felt differently. Theirs had been a passionate and tumultuous affair, but Colin had ended it the moment he fell in love with me. That he had adored her, I'd never doubted. A dozen years ago I'd seen the pain her death in the line of duty had caused him. Now I was content to relegate the past to where it belonged. Most of the time, that is. Kat did her best to keep it front and centre. "She can afford to take time away from her studies?" I asked. He scowled, not an expression he pulled often while discussing his daughter. When it came to his children, he had a tendency toward overindulgence. "I haven't managed to convince her to continue at Oxford. She explained she prefers the world as classroom." The Countess had settled upon Kat a significant fortune that until she turned 25 Colin would manage on her behalf. Even so, her generous allowance enabled her to do nearly anything she wanted. Any father would worry, but Colin had no stomach for controlling her by tugging purse strings. He was wise enough to recognise that would only cause longer-term problems. "Better that she come to Egypt with us than go on her own, and meet someone halfway up the Great Pyramid," I said. "I doubt our presence would stop her. If anything, it might encourage her, and I doubted marriage would be the outcome. Kat was a very modern girl. There was no imperative to say it out loud. I could see in his dark eyes that my husband shared my concerns. The sublime difference between a cold, wet English winter and Egypt's golden...